Welcome to this explainer, where we're jumping straight into the single biggest shakeup happening in tech right now. We are talking, of course, about the changing of the guard at Apple. You know, for over a decade, we've all known exactly what an Apple led by a supply chain mastermind looks like. But that era, it's officially coming to a close as a completely new type of leader takes the wheel.
And naturally, the internet is already having an absolute field day with this news. I mean, look at this fantastic Reddit comment. It perfectly sums it up. Friendship with Tim Apple ended. Now John Apple is new best friend. But jokes aside, while the community is busy crowning Johnny Appleseed, this transition is actually a massive, fundamental strategic pivot for the tech giant. We aren't just swapping out a CEO here. We're looking at a complete shift in the company's corporate DNA.
So, it really begs the question, what actually happens when a hands-on hardware engineer takes over the world's biggest tech company? Well, throughout this explainer, we're going to dig into exactly how a shift from operations-focused leadership to engineering-focused leadership might fundamentally change the very devices you're carrying in your pocket right now.
All right, Section 1, the end of Tim Apple. Let's talk about transitioning to a new era.
To really understand where we're headed, we first need to look at the departure of a CEO whose legacy is frankly unmatched in modern corporate history. 15. That is a massive number. For 15 years, Tim Cook has been at the helm. It's actually a crazy piece of trivia that Cook has led Apple as CEO for longer than Steve Jobs did. Under his watch, Apple transformed into a literal $3 trillion empire. But after a decade and a half of unprecedented financial growth, it's finally time for a change.
But here's the catch. He isn't packing up his desk and leaving the company entirely. While people are playfully joking that Tim Apple is now simply Tim, his new position is highly strategic. Cook is stepping into the role of executive chairman, where his main focus is going to be engaging with policymakers around the globe. He's basically taking on the global diplomacy side of things, leaving the day-to-day innovation and product development to his successor.
Which brings us to Section 2. Who is John Ternus? Time to meet the new boss.
So who exactly is the 50-year-old internal hire stepping into arguably the biggest, most heavily scrutinized shoes in the entire tech industry? Well, it represents a stark contrast in leadership. Tim Cook's superpower? That's always been supply operations. The guy is a master of logistics, margins, and global manufacturing. John Ternus, on the other hand, comes from a background in mechanical engineering. So we're moving away from a supply chain wizard directly to a pure, deeply entrenched product and hardware expert.
And he's got the receipts to prove it. Ternus holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering, specifically majoring in mechanical engineering from the University of Pennsylvania. Before he ever even set foot in Apple, Ternus was cutting his teeth as a mechanical engineer at Virtual Research Systems. This isn't a finance guy who just learned about tech on the fly. This is an engineer with deep, hands-on roots in the actual creation of physical products.
Let's dive into Section 3, a return to hardware, the product-first approach.
Honestly, as Senior Vice President of Hardware Engineering, Ternus has already kind of been secretly running your digital life for a while now. Over the last few years, he's overseen a massive portfolio. We're talking the iPhone, iPad, Mac, AirPods, and the incredibly ambitious Apple Vision Pro. But perhaps his absolute crowning achievement so far was steering the widely praised transition to Apple Silicon, the M1 MacBooks. He was absolutely instrumental in rolling back some of those controversial design choices from the mid-2010s and delivering exactly what power users had been begging for.
And because of that amazing track record, community sentiment right now is through the roof. Just look at this quote from a tech enthusiast. This could be really good for Apple as John Ternus wants to innovate and not do incremental improvements. People are genuinely hoping that having a real product guy at the very top means a definitive end to so-called product fatigue and a return to aggressive, breathtaking innovation.
So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that Ternus isn't just about maintaining the status quo. Yeah, he led that stellar M1 MacBook Pro era, but surprisingly, he was also the head of the initiative advocating for device self-repair, which, let's be real, is a massive shift in Apple's historical stance. On top of that, he's the guiding force behind highly anticipated upcoming devices like the MacBook Neo, the super thin iPhone Air, and the eventual iPhone Fold. This is a leader who is clearly eager to push hardware boundaries.
Moving right along to Section 4, assembling the new team, rebuilding leadership.
You know, a CEO is really only as good as their team. And Ternus is already making these swift, pretty surprising moves to consolidate engineering talent. If you map out the transition timeline, it reveals a steady, deliberate transfer of power. Ever since the announcement, he's been sitting in on the big decisions, orchestrating key personnel moves, all culminating in him officially taking the CEO reins on September 1st. It's a textbook example of a smooth, yet highly active corporate handover.
And speaking of those personnel moves, this one is highly unusual and super telling. Laura Legros was a trusted lieutenant from his hardware days who actually retired back in 2022. Well, Ternus is literally unretiring her. He's bringing her back to Apple to report directly to him and help steer the ship. It absolutely proves he wants trusted hardware veterans by his side as he takes over this massive corporate apparatus.
And he's pairing that move with another major shift. Johnny Srouji is being elevated to a brand new position, Chief Hardware Officer. What we're seeing here is a massive, massive consolidation of hardware and engineering power at the very top of Apple's organizational chart. The signal to the market, and to us as consumers, is loud and clear. Hardware and engineering are back in the absolute driver's seat.
But, okay, let's look at Section 5, the challenges ahead. The consumer mandate.
Because, let's be honest, it's not all sunshine and smooth sailing here. Ternus is inheriting a user base that, while super excited about the hardware, is growing increasingly frustrated with software instability. Real-world reviews point to some glaring issues. Just listen to this frustrated user. "I'm tired of my app icons reloading, or my iPhone 17 Pro Max roasting in my pocket for no reason." Users are reporting severe thermal throttling on the latest Pro Max, alongside these annoying UI bugs that just constantly interrupt the daily experience. The hardware might look beautiful, but right now, the software experience is kind of holding it back.
Therefore, the mandate from the consumer to the new CEO is incredibly clear, and it basically breaks down into 3 steps. First, you gotta immediately fix the underlying software bugs and thermal throttling. Second, put an end to the anemic, incremental yearly updates. And third, treat the software with the exact same care as the hardware. Seriously, consumers just want the reliability and perfection of that M1 MacBook Pro era brought over to their iOS experience.
And while he tackles all those consumer demands, he still has to keep the business side perfectly tuned. I mean, he's following a 15-year legacy of historic financial growth. Wall Street is going to be watching with eagle eyes to see if Ternus's engineering-first mindset can actually maintain the immense financial success and operational efficiency built during the Tim Cook era. Can an engineer keep a $3 trillion engine running just as smoothly as a supply chain master did?
So as we all look forward to September 1st, we really have to ask ourselves this final question. Is this the dawn of a new hardware renaissance that's going to bring back the aggressive, risk-taking Apple innovation of the 2000s? Or will the sheer weight and pressure of managing a $3 trillion company force John Apple to just play it safe? The pieces are on the board, the engineering talent is consolidated at the top, and literally the whole world is watching to see what the next generation of Apple truly looks like. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on September 1st.